Hi everyone, good afternoon. We're going to begin the third panel of the day. I'm very honored to be chairing this session on the tools of ecological planning. So the aim of this panel is to explore what could be described by following the steps of Otto Neurath, for example, that we talked about this morning. So to describe the tools for in-kind calculation, and more precisely, the tools in order to create a calculation of lifestyles. These approaches are fundamental for economic planning in the 21st century, as inter-industrial models and accounting frameworks today are being developed in radically different terms compared to the modernization-driven planning in the 20th century. So let me introduce you our two speakers. Our first speaker is Julien Lefevre from the CIRED. Is contributing authors to the IPCC, especially to the Working Group 3 on climate change mitigation. He will present a paper entitled The Role of Input-Output Analysis in Modeling Sustainability Transitions. His work examines how environmentally extended input-output analysis, especially when combined with technology-rich models, can be used to develop transition scenarios that focus on sufficiency, human needs, and ecological boundaries. Our second speaker, Clement Surun, who was also member of the CIRED, but now works as a consultant at ICAR, specializes in biodiversity, in ecological accounting. His presentation is titled Accounting for National and Corporate Environmental Liabilities, a Steering Tool Towards a Sustainable Economy. He explores the limits of current national accounting systems in addressing environmental issues and proposes an ecological accounting framework that connects corporate and national levels. This approach seeks to offer a more politically grounded and operational tool for guiding ecological transition strategies. I give the floor to our speakers.
Thanks a lot, François-Xavier. Thanks a lot, Cédric as well, and then the team for the invitation today. So let me try to go full screen, perhaps here, right? Oh, with the mouse.
Yeah, right here.
Which one?
This one, yeah.
Okay, and great. Okay, so as François-Xavier introduced, so my background is energy and climate economics, and I'm especially working with models and modeling-based scenarios. And so today I will try to talk a bit about the quantitative tools that we have to try to build to try to understand the transformation pathways that could lead us to, let's say, serve just and safe space for humanity. So the starting point could be summarized with this kind of graph that you have here that you may already have seen. The fact that today no country in the world managed to provide basic needs or a social foundation for everyone at the same time respecting planetary boundaries. So this is, and countries have also different situation, as you can see here with this famous donut representation. So that's the starting point that everyone here knows actually, and so this actually calls for deep transformations towards sustainability and to safeguard human and planetary health. So here we have a need to explore feasible pathways. Okay, we need some roadmaps and about transformation pathway that actually can conduce to a safe and just space. And these pathways should also give us enough information and especially on detailed socioeconomic and ecological transformations along the way. And also, to a certain extent, the associated policies that could help us go into these pathways. And so to a certain extent, there is also a hope that these pathways can give some insights for economic and ecological planning. So what are the tools out there? If we look at the tools, though, what comes first are so-called integrated assessment models. You may have heard about these kind of tools. They have a kind of domination, I would say, in the landscape, and especially in the climate change research. And they are dominant tool for exploring strategies for climate change mitigation, especially, and also other policy goals. And here on the graph, you can see the kind of growing importance and growing influence of these tools, and especially for IPCC assessment. So these are like dominant tools. What are they more precisely? They are simpler representation of complex real system, and especially critical systems like the energy system, economic system, or land use. And the goal is to simulate the interaction within and between those critical systems. What for? To quantify forward-looking scenarios and transformation pathways, and especially cost-effective technological developments to achieve climate targets. That's the general introduction of these tools. So now let's get for a few minutes into the boxes and into what can appear to be like black boxes to a certain extent. So perhaps we can have an impression of diversity of models, but in fact the modeling paradigms are quite a few, I would say, and even there is to a certain extent a single modeling approach, I would say, like almost two-thirds of the scenarios that have been assessed in the working group 3 by the IPCC are based on this kind of structure. Even if there are like 30 or 40 models, again, two-thirds are mostly based on this general structure, which we can summarize as follows. I would say a kind of loose link between the economic system on the top, but very roughly described as a GDP, more or less, with little additional details. The GDP on the top, that is linked to the energy system on the bottom. Okay, and so pretty much in a linear fashion, in the sense that GDP drives demand for energy, which is supplied by a mix of technology. Okay. So a kind of linear approach with a loose coupling between the economy on the top and mostly represented through a single sector, a single macroeconomic sector, and somehow more detailed representation of the energy systems, but based on a basket of technologies. Okay, that's basically how it works. So it's basically what the kind of system that are represented by these models. And I think with that in mind, we can understand the important gaps that have this kind of dominant tools, and especially regarding the objective to represent deep transformation of both economic and biophysical systems. And first of all, they have pretty weak coverage of the linkages, the complex linkages between the biophysical world and the economic one. And especially they cannot capture much the life cycle impacts of technologies. Okay, for instance, they are not accounting very well, for instance, the energy that we need to produce the energy technology themselves. For instance, the energy to produce the steel or the aluminum that is further embedded in, let's say, the wind power technologies. Okay, this is missing in this kind of model, and actually this is kind of important aspect. Second, material balances are almost absent from this kind of model. And third, the role of energy in economic growth is quite underestimated in the sense that energy is a small part of the economy. It's like a few percentage GDP points, so it's not important. Okay. And the structural change that will happen in the energy world won't impact much the overall economy. That's a key assumption behind this kind of models. Second point, an insufficient representation of energy demand patterns. Okay, and energy demand patterns, which to a certain extent can be linking to the needs and to the consumer and the needs, which is an important aspect of the discussion today. And as well, the structural change in the economy. As I said before, in most of the models, the economy is just an aggregate. It's GDP. Okay? And there is no sectoral vision of the economy. Okay? So this model cannot capture the structural change in the economy and also the intersectoral linkages happening in the economy. And linking to that, they are not capturing much the environmental impacts beyond GHG, greenhouse gases emissions, and they are not capturing environmental impacts across the supply chains because they are not capturing the intersectoral linkages and the supply chains. Okay. And third point, and I think it's a good summary of what they are green growth machines, okay, in the sense that for most of the model, either GDP is an exogenous assumption, or it is endogenous, but based on very simple optimal growth modeling. Okay, so they are green growth machines, fully anchored in neoclassical economics. So that's the dominant tools out there. On the other hand, there are other approaches to try to understand transformation pathways or ecological transformations. And environmental extended input-output analysis is another strand of quantitative modeling, which at the beginning was the basis of applied macroeconomics, okay, with the work of Leontiev in the 30s and after in the 50s of Richard Stone, for instance. It's the basis of applied economics, and it emphasizes a multi-sectoral approach of the economy and inter-industrial linkages happening in the economy. The focus of this approach is to assess impacts across entire supply chains, okay, and from the perspective of consumption. Okay, consumption is driving. So consumption, to a certain extent, is the need. Okay, the needs drive the production and the supply chains. Then environmental extended is an addition to the standard IO approach with the extension of environmental and material aspects of supply chains, which have become a key tool in industrial ecology. And more recently, the so-called MI-AREO, so multi-regional input-output approach, together with the development of MREO databases, provided an important empirical basis to derive comprehensive environmental or ecological and socio-economic impact through supply chains and also trade. Okay. How does it work? Very quickly. So contrary to what I presented for IAMs, here, of course, we have a multi-sectoral approach of the economy. So the economy is based on several sectors that can amount to, like, in some models, to several hundreds of sectors, which are interlinked. interlinked by, especially through intermediary consumptions, okay, which is at the core of this matrix here. So the economy is based on sectors that also have direct impact, whether social impacts through labor, for instance, or environmental impacts, like through direct pollution, for instance. Okay. And this production matrix is also linking to the final demand, okay, which is to a certain extent the ultimate driver in the system. And as well, what is noticeable is that here the energy system is not something that is just hung to the economy. It is embedded in the economy. Okay, the energy system also economic sectors. Okay, and they can be represented as embedded in the economy, and also in the involved in the intersectoral relationships. So linear approach for IAM, and here I would say more circular approach and interdependence of sectors. Okay. So what are now the capabilities and gaps of, I would say, the standard IO analysis? So first, the capabilities, the important capabilities is to compute footprints. Okay, that's a main input of this kind of approach, to be able through environmental extension to compute environmental and also socioeconomic footprints of nations, for instance. Second, it's an important tool in industrial ecology, and especially in the nexus between the material and carbon footprints. And on this basis, different works have been developed to relate the environmental footprints to diagnosis of a level of overshoot, for instance, ecological overshoot, or inequalities, or progress toward the Sustainable Development Goals, for instance. Okay. And now what are the main gaps with the standard IO approach? The first one is the fact that it basically works on present or past data. Okay, the focus is on past or present relationships, and it's again in the basic approach. It has nothing to do with forward-looking scenarios. Why? Mainly because it's a static approach. Okay, and based on fixed intersectoral relationships, technical coefficients, and also environmental coefficients. So that said, a natural way forward is to try to combine the two visions, IAM and input-output, in order to build on the advantages of the two approaches. And so in this way, there has been some effort to combine the two to address novel challenges in forward-looking scenarios. And these efforts are based on soft linkages between independent models. So independent IAM and the transformation pathways derived from IAM and input-output modeling. And just to take a few examples, this kind of advancements have enabled to, for instance, quantify life cycle environmental impacts of technologies, but in future scenarios. Okay, not the environmental impact of scenario of technology today, but in future scenarios. Okay. So it's possible to do that for single technologies, but also for full transition scenarios. So being able to assess environmental and socioeconomic impact, again, impact through the full supply chains because of the IO structure of full transition scenarios. And this IAM-IO linking is a growing field that requires to be strengthened in different directions. So that's the first way forward. The second way forward is to build new models, okay, new integrated assessment models, based in particular on new IAM that are to a certain extent based on the IO framework. And we have to build new IAM that are also different from existing multisectoral CG models, okay? Because there are also some IAM that are based on multisectoral computable general equilibrium models, okay? But the problem of this model is that they are also anchored in neoclassical economics, okay, with assumption of perfect markets, optimization, and also mostly based on economic flows. So there are IO metrics behind this kind of models, but only economic flows and not material flows. So there is a need to develop new tools, okay, new economic approach of energy transition models, encompassing complexity, non-equilibrium, so as opposed to general equilibrium, and also to deal with uncertainty. And the emerging field of ecological macroeconomics is a promising one, and is mostly based on the combination of post-Keynesian macroeconomics, okay, that are initially not devoted to ecological issues. Combination with this macroeconomics with ecological economics, okay, to build so-called ecological macroeconomic models. And the idea is to be able to quantify the full transformation pathways is to go towards ecological, what we can call ecological macroeconomic IAMs. What would be the ingredient of these models? There could be three, basically. So a core input-output representation in the economy, okay, that represent the interlinkages between economic sectors in both monetary metric but also in physical ones, together with system dynamics that would describe the evolution, the dynamic evolution of different subsystems, like the energy systems, the land use systems, and so on. And third, a post-Keynesian approach of macroeconomics, and for instance, based on the so-called stock flow consistent model. And these models are promising in the sense that they better capture economic and biophysical linkages to assess integrated concerns about ecological impacts, but also financial stability and overall social progress. And now on, I would like to illustrate this with some practical examples and practical quantification in different domain. And I will jump that and I will go directly to this. A concrete illustration of how this new tool, so either IAM, IO, soft linking, or new IAMs, how they can first help to calculate lifestyle shifts, and especially related to sufficiency. And here, again, the MIREO approach can help a lot to do that, because they allow, the MIREO approach allow comprehensive exploration of demand side or demand-oriented measure from an economy-wide perspective. Because remember, in the IO matrix that I presented, there was that final demand, okay, that describe like the final demand, but for different kind of goods and services. So we have details on the consumption basket, okay, and it can be very detailed. The order of magnitude could amount to several hundreds of sectors. So gives kind of details. And so what we can do with that is we can simulate detailed. So we can simulate demand-oriented measures through three main options. So first of all, representing detailed changes of consumption patterns, okay, because we have a detailed representation of the final demand. Second, we can model modification of inputs for production in industries. And third, reducing direct environmental impacts. Among these demand-oriented measures, we have what we call the lifestyle sheets and sufficiency. So sufficiency is a broad term that can have many definitions. I suggest the following one is to avoid sufficiency transitions or practice or policies is about avoiding material and energy demand through changes in practices and behaviors, of course, while delivering well-being for all. Okay, so and it can be defined as opposed to technological solutions. Okay, for instance, not taking the car to go to work would be about sufficiency, but changing my car, my thermal engine car to an electric one would not be sufficiency. Would be technological change. Okay, and in practice, yeah, sufficiency implied the type of change of consumption as follows. So first of all, reduction of consumption. So there can be total reductions of different consumption, but also modal shifts. So for transportation, from the car to the bike or public transportations, product longevity, sharing practice, and so on. And in this view, the IO representation allows comprehensive representation of sufficiency, ranging from direct end-use energy sufficiency for transportation, housing, to a granular differentiation between high versus low resource intensive, or luxury versus essential goods and services. And I will go to a practical example with the case study that we are working on for France. And I won't go into the full detail, but just to give you a flavor of the kind of detail that we manipulate and the kind of quantification that we are trying to make. So we start with many assumptions for different sectors about changes of consumption. So for instance, if we take buildings and construction, we make different assumptions that in the end amounts to reduce the square meters of the building stock. Okay? And it can be through different more detailed changes and policies. For transportation, we have the same kind of approach that in the end leads to reduce the flows of transportation, whether for a passenger or for freight. We can do the same for food, and especially for food, the change of diets is a key aspect. But also we can do that for manufactured goods and until services. Services is the trickiest part, and we could discuss a lot about the desirable changes related to services. But I won't go into too many details. But one key example is, for instance, to reduce advertising, okay, or to reduce telecommunications to a certain extent. And on the other hand, there is a plus for education, for instance. We would want to increase this kind of educational services. So these are many assumptions that can be integrated in the IO framework in order to especially understand the environmental implication of this. If we implement all these measures, what will be the impact on, for France, for instance, on the direct emissions on the French territory, but also, which is key here, on the carbon footprint of France. So taking into account all the impacts through the supply chains, including the emission generating abroad. Okay. And so here it's the kind of result that we can get. I won't go into the details, but I would like just to make several observations. The first one is that we have, again, the sectoral details, okay, and the different contribution of at the sectoral level. And also, again, the direct emission versus carbon footprint point of view. But to perhaps to just remember an order of magnitude, if we add, to a certain extent, the two graphs, we reach less 30% of emissions only related to sufficiency practice. So it gives you an order of magnitude of what is reachable in terms of reduction of emission only with sufficiency. We estimated to between 20 and 30% of emission reductions in this study. Also, what also can be interesting is to compare sufficiency with other demand-side solutions. As I mentioned before, with demand-side solution, there are sufficiency, which is about changing behaviors, but also technical fixes. Technical fixes, we can have efficiency. So, for instance, building more efficient cars or buildings, but also change of energy, like electrification. And here we have tried to compare efficiency, electrification to sufficiency in terms of potential of reducing emissions. And what is important to note here, for instance, in this graph on the left, is that contrary to efficiency and electrification, which have only direct impact on emissions in France, sufficiency has also an indirect impact on emissions generated abroad. Because sufficiency, to a certain extent, is about reducing our material basis. I mean, the material underpinnings of our consumption. And in France, material are imported.
Sorry, Julien, could you just repeat the difference between efficiency and sufficiency? What are the...
Efficiency is technical solutions. Efficiency, so like I have a more efficient car, I buy a more efficient car, or I isolate better my home. So efficiency and electrification are technical solutions, whereas sufficiency is about change of practice and behavior. Okay, and here's just an illustration that sufficiency, if you only take a look at the direct emission on the territory, you can underestimate the climate effect of sufficiency, because for a country like France, sufficiency means importing less material, for instance, less material stuffs, and so decreasing the emissions abroad. So just an example to illustrate how by capturing supply chains between sector and trade with the IO model, we can reach to this kind of conclusions. So I see the time moving. And also on the graph on the right, it is to illustrate the fact that we can also have the sectoral detail of the effect. So understanding, for instance, for the sufficiency, what is the share of the carbon footprint reduction linked to the sufficiency related to particular behaviors or particular sector? For instance, in green, the emission reduction that you can get from changing diets or linked to sufficiency related to food. Okay, so green is food. Yellow would be linked to housing, and purple would be transportation. So you can have an understanding of the specific impact of the different sufficiency actions related to different aspects of the consumption, different sectors. And this, again, is in forward-looking scenarios. It's not past analysis, it's to understand the potential in future scenarios. Again, to understand the transition towards the final goal. Okay. Second application that we can have with this kind of tool is to inform structural change aligned with the post-growth transition. So the word post-growth happened a few times this morning. It's also a key topic here. And so starting perhaps with I'm daring here a definition also. The definition of post-growth is not unique, and there can be, and it's to a certain extent, I would say blurry, but we can try to define it as follows here. So a prosperous economy that does not rely on continued growth, and it's based on principles of equity, sufficiency, and service provision to achieve strong social outcomes while minimizing environmental impacts. And if we take a look at what is out there in terms of trying to model post-growth climate scenarios, the main issue we have is that most of the attempts to model post-growth scenarios is based on exogenous reduction of aggregate GDP or aggregate consumption, or else a proportional downsizing of the economy. Okay, and here I think there is a risk of what we can call the reverse causality error, which has been underlined by Saving and Van der Meer, in the sense that doing that what is actually modeled is not post-growth to a certain extent, because it's better. It's more about the implication for the environment or of reducing GDP, of reducing the size of GDP. But there is a question of to what extent this actually represents a planned reduction of selected activities. So there is an issue here. That's why I think a key objective that the post-growth climate modeling community should have is to capture sector-specific resizing. Okay? Post-growth, again, is not about downsizing the economy, a proportional downsizing of economy, but it's a sector-specific resizing, taking into account sectoral interdependencies and structural change for both supply and demand sides. And this in order to capture the complexities of what would be a planned and differentiated post-growth transition. So if we try to better understand what could be a structural change associated with post-growth, the idea is to think about sector-specific resizing based on the characteristics of the sectors related to ecological impacts on the one hand, and to the contribution to social well-being to the other. And this reasoning can go for the demand side, but also for the supply side. For the demand side, I think the sufficiency principle is key. Again, to think about what consumption needs to be reduced and what consumption needs to be increased. And also in the perspective of providing equitable need satisfaction. And on the supply side, there is the issue of labor, okay? And favor high labor intensity and also low potential for growth of labor productivity. And doing that, the IO framework allows to assess structural change for post-growth economy by integrating the two, integrating the demand and the supply side, or saying differently, both consumption and production sides. Okay, by describing the changes of both consumption and production structures. So again, an example here of a work in progress that we are investigating for France. So try to project structural change for a post-growth economy in France. The starting point is a mapping of the sectors. Okay. So on the x-axis, it's the labor intensity of the sector. Okay, so the higher labor intensity, the higher on the right. On the y-axis is the carbon intensity of the sectors. And the size of the circle is the speed of labor productivity. So to what extent the sector, the speed of technical change and labor productivity. And to summarize, one structural change goal of a post-growth economy would be to decrease the blue sectors and to a certain extent increase the yellow one. Okay? The sectors that are at the lowest carbon intensity, but at the same time a high labor intensity and a slow labor-saving technical change. Okay? So based on this map, we can try to make some normative scenarios related to a post-growth structural change. Quick example of the kind of results that we can have. I won't go into the full details, but here what I show you is the results in terms of, so it's in French, sorry for that. It's the impact of different scenarios to labor, to employment. Okay. So the first scenario here on the left is when we just implement sufficiency on the demand side of the economy. Okay. The second one, we had some trend labor productivity gains in the economy, so without selecting the sectors. And the third one is to try to favor specific sectors, and especially here, agriculture, based on agroecology, for instance, so more labor-intensive agriculture, and second, service-intensive sectors. And what we show is that doing that, we can So overall, reduce the carbon footprint of the economy, but at the same time, reduce the negative impact of sufficiency, so of reduction of consumption on labor, because we make some structural change towards more labor-intensive sectors. Okay. And on the right, you have a summary of the structural change that we managed to project. Yeah, so that's it. Just to give you a favor of what we can do with projection based on a higher model. And maybe if I have time, I don't know how much time do I have, François-Xavier, perhaps 5 minutes? Yeah. So I would like to show you a third example, so more dynamic this time, more dynamic, related to not a national post-growth scenario, but a global post-growth scenarios. Okay. I think the question of global scenarios also arose this morning, and especially related to the unequal exchange between global north and global south. And so this kind of work is about this topic. And so global progress scenarios introduce international justice considerations, okay? And also spatial differentiation between different countries. And what I show you here is the state of current global scenarios in terms of future inequalities. Okay? This is taken from that paper from Mikkel and Slamersack. And what you can see, so this is the energy use for the global north and the global south. Okay? For I think it's the IPC scenarios. And what you can see actually is that most of the scenarios just perpetuate north-south inequalities of especially energy use. Okay? So there is an important issue to build more convergent scenarios, okay, to illustrate how a truly equitable world can look like. Okay, and this doesn't really exist now in the scenario space. So it's what we can try to do here, and to understand how sufficiency and the post-growth transition in high-income countries can go hand in hand with economic sovereignty and living standard or resource convergence in the global south. And to this goal, we have tried to make a first contribution in this direction by building a global post-growth and convergence scenario with a multi-regional IO-based macroeconomic IAM that we have developed at CIRED, which is based on two aspects. So first of all, sufficiency-oriented demand-side transformations and structural economic shift in high and medium-income countries. So the kind of structural change that I've illustrated for France. Okay, we do that for high-income countries. But at the same time, we model a catch-up of living standards and faster sovereign economic development in low-income countries. And when we do that with the model, we reach this kind of projections. Again, here there are a lot of things to discuss, but I would like just to focus on one or two. First, maybe just to say that the red one is basically the scenario that are illustrated here. Okay, it's the business as usual scenario, the central climate scenario, and you can see here. So, for instance, there are different variables. Yeah, maybe let me clarify a bit the variables. So, the variables that we manipulate here are first of all linked to the living standards. Living standards about floor space, okay, in square meters. So, first floor space per person, passenger mobility per person, and also an index of industrial consumption per person. Okay. Linked to that, the final energy consumption on the top left. And after that, in this scenario, the GDP is a consequence of this, of the transformation of the sectoral content of the economy. So here, GDP is not an assumption, it's a consequences of assumption about what happens for transport consumption, residential consumption, industrial consumption, and so on. And so what you can see here is with a post-growth, a full post-growth scenario, which is the green one, we managed to represent full convergence of first living standards, represented by a convergence of floor space, passenger mobility to a certain extent, because we also have to take into account the geographical disparities in the different countries, but also industrial consumption. And GDP is just the consequence of that. So this is a work in progress, and again, the goal here is to try to build new scenarios again, based on a more convergent view of both living standards and income across countries. So now I'm reaching the conclusion here that I would like to raise. So first of all, I have tried to illustrate how IAM and IO linking and IO-based ecological macroeconomic IAMs offer some important potential to quantify transformation pathways towards sustainability and the satisfaction of human needs with ecological limits. And particularly, this approach are, I think, valuable for assessing structural changes linked to deep lifestyle shifts, sufficiency, and post-growth transition across national and global scales. And of course, this is only first steps, and further development of this model is urgently needed, and some additional scenario analysis to inform really actionable strategies. Okay, and in the end, to guide economic and ecological planning. Thank you.
So, hello everyone. Thank you very much, François-Xavier and Cédric, for the invitation and the organization of this very interesting conference. Actually, I will present today works done during my PhD. So, and I'm very happy of being here today because I did the PhD during COVID time, and then I was struggling a lot with international experts and other people that didn't agree at all with my work. So now I feel I'm happy to know that there is a home and there are people that are thinking a little bit like me and my colleagues. So I'm very happy to have a discussion about this work with you today. So this was work done in CIRED and funded by the Ecological Accounting Chair in France. So now I'm not doing research anymore, but I am a consultant. But don't worry, I won't sell you anything today. Yeah. So I will talk about accounting. So this boring thing you might have encountered before during your economic studies or else. So obviously there is a technical part on the topic, but there is also a very, very interesting historical and sociological part in there, and especially when it goes to the link between the system itself and the management context in which it is built and used. So. And in particular, when we talk about national accounting, this system is highly interlinked with or interrelated with idealized programs for government of society overall, and different kinds of national accounting has raised, especially in the after the Second World War, in different countries, like in France, in China, of course, more recently, but in the Netherlands, they were also another slightly different system after the war that was very interesting, and that tells a lot about how the relationship between society and the economy was seen then, and how the state could act on the economy. And also, there is a very interesting thing about putting a quantitative measure of something in the collective discussion, because when you create a quantitative thing, you have to make choices, about how you calculate that, what you put in your scope, and so on. And that changes a lot how you see the object itself in comparison to before the quantitative measure appeared. And so another thing is that accounting is a key institution for ecological transition, because it is something that that lies here, that remains unchanged for a lot of time, because we invest a lot in statistical systems and statistical information, because it is standardized as well. And so if we want to integrate the environment into that, we have to be very careful about how we do it, because we will frame problems a given way, and then we can change it for decades. So the key questions that I was trying to answer, or to elaborate, were the following ones. So why and how to link national and organizations' ecological liabilities, and what would be the right conventions to do that, or the design choices we could follow, and what were the implications of those choices. And there was, of course, the idea to strengthen the ecological transition. So then there was something that was quite original at that time, the link between national accounting and business accounting. So actually, even now, a few papers deal with this topic, and what information we could use from the real economy to go away from too many modeling choices to build a more robust system. And so to do that, I did a multidisciplinary work based on history of national accounting, and also the development of the standard of environmental accounting, so the SIA, System of Environmental and Economic Accounting. I relied a little bit on the business accounting theory, and a model developed to include ecological liabilities at the business side. But also conservation science and policy, and a bit of sociology to understand the context and how it could be used and what it would change. We developed, and we also reused or analyzed other experimental accounts, especially on water bodies and the Water Framework Directive in France. I work with other colleagues on marine ecosystems. We work on non-net take. And also there are many interesting works on carbon emissions. And we developed an accounting proposal that was aimed to enrich the discussion about the standardization of national economic accounting. So today I will go through these different topics. So the first one is that there is a rather scattered landscape with many proposals, especially at the business level, but also quite some at the national level. There are controversies about what would be the best way to build such an accounting system, and those controversies might have a lot of consequences then on what we do. And then we propose a few key principles to define ecological liability in order to help ecological transition. I will present then one example of my PhD on, so not the one on water bodies, but the other one. And I will try to elaborate a bit how it could help the ecological transition and planning. So the landscape I was evolving in is the following one. So you have well, first, these different systems at both levels. So, so you have several proposals. You have or existing systems. So on the economic side, you have different standards. And I was focusing in France, so that's why below you see the Plan Comptable Général there. And there were proposals quite well. It started in the 1970s, but then the most elaborate ones appeared in the 1990s by Rufi Hueting, Paul Ekins as well. They were first standardization trials, and then a French national accountant developed a very interesting proposal. So here you see international initiatives by the UN up and the World Bank below. And other proposals made more recently in 2015 by Alexandre Rambaud and Jacques Richard in France. And more recently, we had a lot of interesting, more or less interesting actually, proposals and a beginning of standardization at the EU level and at the international level. But quite separated from that, you also have a lot of people working on building information system about the state and the condition of ecosystems, and that's mostly related to public policies. You also have scientific work that are very interesting, and a lot of regulation applying to companies that also generate information, and many other possibilities. So as for us, we've deleted. Well, we're focusing on a few of them, and especially on the ones we thought were rooted into strong sustainability principles, and that would be the most helpful for ecological transition. So one main thing was for me to translate the CARE model into national accounting, and then trying to reuse the existing data in order to experiment if it was actually possible to build such accounts right now. So, when you want to build an accounting system, you have to make several kind of choices that are very important. The first one is obviously the unit of account that you will use. It can be either monetary or physical, or both. And here I will present 3 contrasted examples. So the first version of the standard, the international standard made by the UN, the proposal of Vanoli, and a more recent proposal of the UN that is a bit different. Then a very important thing is the valuation framing you use. Because if you want to talk about ecosystems, and you have to frame the problem again, and you can either, if you want to calculate numbers on that, you can either start from the impact on the environment that the economy does, or the other way, the impact on the economy resulting of a degraded environment. And if you make the first choice, then you will calculate preservation costs, so action costs that have to be new expenses that have to be made in order to reach a given threshold of good ecological status, for instance. Or you can rely on the other thing, what you will lose if ecosystems are degraded. And that is obviously, it leads to very different outcomes then for the society, because when you read that, either you will want to reduce the cost, or to manage and pilot the costs, and to reach a good ecological status, or you will just try to minimize the loss or maximize the value you can get from it, from ecosystems. And so that's not at all the same actions then that are following. Then there are other key issues like aggregation. Do you want to have a single aggregated metric with all the information about environment embedded with the economic ones, like in green GDP, for instance? Or you can also choose to split the information, and that's what Vanoli did, to maybe counterbalance and have a global view of what's happening. Another important thing is that you can choose or not to represent nature or ecosystems, or maybe actors representing the environment in the system itself. And some people did not, and some others did. And it has, of course, a lot of implications about how you see the governance of environmental issues. And then the last one is that you can either consider ecosystems or the atmosphere as an asset, so something that produces value that you can get. Assets also relies to the idea of property, or you can frame the problem and consider the environment as liabilities. So you can consider that the economy has liabilities and things to repay to the environment, or to repair, and that's obviously extremely different. And so on my PhD, I focused a lot on the controversy on valuation framing, especially in the UN, because there was a big shift in the UN expert group over the last 30 years. And actually, it turned out that the weak sustainability view kind of win so far. Okay, so that's also partly why we wanted to propose something different. And so here are the key principles we write to define ecological liabilities. So debt arises of a result of a reversible environmental degradation, so that's very important. And it is simply expressed as a difference between the current condition indicator and a reference level that we want to reach back at some point. And so that's the real debt is like that. And then you can also create an indicator, another indicator, a monetary one, that is calculated as the sum of the budgeted cost to ensure the preservation of the ecological entity you are considering. So in the biophysical system, there is a few choices that you have to make. And one very debated topic is the target and the threshold that you want to of good ecological status and it's very difficult because you can either choose a historical state of ecosystems and species, or even for the atmosphere. You can also choose something different, and you have many possibilities. So what we propose is to use the concept of good ecological status that is already used in many EU public policies, like the Water Framework Directive, the Marine Policies, Habitat Directive, and others. And because it has a lot of qualities. It is something that is at the same time rooted in scientific knowledge. It is also agreed with a political agreement because it follows then. It is included and it follows a legislative process. And it's also operational because then you have a lot of indicators, you can measure it and you can follow it on the ground. So this concept actually appears to be rather stable over time, so it's a good one. And it's also part of actual institutional arrangements because it leads to a lot of regulation on the ground, to public funding, and so on. So this is something that is very actionable. Another very important thing is that, and so this contrasts, for instance, with purely scientific targets like the planetary boundaries I've been showing just before, that are lying on the purely that are environmental limits and that are less actionable. Another very important thing is that there might, in some proposals, like the UN one, we have a restriction on instrumental views only. And so here we propose to enlarge the perspective by including other indicators and other kind of liabilities, which is not actually possible technically in the current UN system. And there you have different kind of values, so instrumental, down, but also linked to ecological quality and heritage values. And that do not relate at all to instrumental and I would say actual needs, but rather to what we want to preserve. Okay, so now after all these principles, I will show you a few things we've made to build and to try to build such an accounting system. So we took a land take example in France, which was a new policy then, and we calculated the physical debt as a difference between the target and the actual land take, and we made growth calculations to estimate a debt at the national level. And then, based on the work on the controversies and the standardization rules that applies to the national accounting, we've added new accounts that you can see in green, and a new column to represent nature as an actor itself, as an institutional sector, actually. So, so what you see is that you have the flow accounts up, and then the change in the stocks below. So that's the classic structure of national accounts. And you have different accounts. So you see GDP up there, you have the production on the right, and then all the consumption of the value created, the savings then, and the change in stocks. And what you see is that we have added a few lines here to account for the debts, and we have splitted other accounts up there to identify better activities related to information related to the ecological transition. And so we put our numbers there. So this is the liabilities we've calculated, and we have to respect the double entry, actually the quadruple entry system. So you also have to write down a few numbers there. Then here we have the actual expense that was made in 2021 to restore artificialized spaces. So that was only 1 billion. And here another writing relates to the fact that there is the expense on one side, but then if it really improved the ecological quality, you can decrease the debt, and that's a separate writing. And here you can, we've added the actual numbers for the construction sector from the INSEE, and all the other numbers. And so what you see here is that there is actually a financial need of 7 billion euros to reach the given threshold and the target, but the sector has only spent 1 billion. But actually, if you compare that to the savings, there you see that there was actually the money to reimburse the ecological loans, but it wasn't spent for that. So yeah, so now you can imagine that if the INSEE was producing this kind of tables for all environmental issues, you can have very interesting discussion at the global level to see what are the financial needs for ecological transition, and who could pay for that, and who has the capacity to pay for that, who needs help, and so on. So that was only the national accounting part, but you also have the care model that does the same at the business level. So the care model is at the stage of experimentation and development. It's a bit more than experimentation, because now there are a few consulting companies implementing it for voluntary businesses. So it spreads more and more, but we are not yet at the stage of having it throughout all the economy. But what's very interesting is that the recent Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive set by the EU really builds the foundation of this model. So there is no accounting structure yet, there is no obligation to calculate the liabilities and so on, but there is the whole biophysical system that all the companies now have to publish. So they have to say how much they impact, on what, and so on. So actually this on the business side, the things are moving forward, and maybe in a few years, decades, I don't know, we could also see this model spreading. So now you see a little bit more how it looks like. I would like to elaborate a little bit on how it could help. I imagine that you can guess a little bit how this information could be used, but actually it has a lot of developing these institutions have a lot of effects on the economy. So to make you understand that, I present you a very interesting work made by Alain Desrosières, a French sociologist of quantification, who studied the different forms of planning and statistical tools that were used by the states, by different states, especially in Europe. And he defines different categories of states according to their way of thinking the society and the economy, the way they acted on the economy, and the statistics they developed. So here are the two very contrasted category that you know quite well, I think. Maybe something important is that he has a very neutral view on neoliberal state, because you see that he defines him. Well, the main characteristics he emphasized on is just the fact that it's an economy based on polycentrism, so not exactly the Ostrom way, but it's the idea that there are many decision-making centers with no hierarchy on the top of it. It's characterized by a lot of incentives and ranking by benchmarks. And he also defines other systems, and you can see that actually all these state and planning and kind of intervention in the economy has arose one after the other, but the previous one did not disappear. It's more that new layers were added on the way the state act on the economy. He also describes very well the type of actions and the form of statistics that relate to that. So here you have an example. You also have the one with neoclassical, relating to the neoclassical economics. And in between, you have all those. So then one of my questions were, where would the environment issues appear in that? We already have a lot of data, information system, models, and so on. So if I try to put that into the squares, what does it say? And of course, our proposal of ecological liabilities, where would it go? So here I've added a sum. So you see that, for instance, the tables presented by Julien relates more to engineering states. I didn't put the IAM, but I don't know, maybe you can elaborate on what you think about that. Maybe, I don't know if it's on the peer or Canadian one. Yeah, post-Canadian maybe. Well, yeah, we can discuss that after. And then you see that the monetary account of the UN system more relates to a liberal state, so that's my analysis at least, because the state has still an important role, but through the idea that we should reveal the value of nature, but only consider it as a resource, and the fact that it also, there is a very important underlying idea that the market is just blind to the environment, and if we give it the right information, it will act rationally and preserve it, at least at the level of still providing ecosystem services. Then I thought, well, maybe these ecological liabilities of us might relate to the Canadian state, but actually it doesn't work that much. Okay. Also, you see that the neoliberal state rise more recently because the economy was globalized and so on. And you see appearing over there the non-financial reporting and the sustainability reporting at the business level that also fits quite well in this way of thinking the relationship between the state and the economy, because with sustainability reporting, you provide new information about what happens at the business level, and then you let the actors interact, negotiate, and so on to change their behavior. And the care model also create new environmental performances that are published as well. And so I was like, well, I'm not really sure about where we could put these liability things, and so I went back to the different systems. The difference with the previous scheme is that now there is my PhD. Because we made a proposal, especially in the paper we published. So it's not exactly the Van Olle's approach. It's a bit tweaked, and I hope improved. And so it's here. And so we try to integrate all this management information system into accounting in order to integrate them with the financial information, and the same at the business level. What we saw, what we still can see, is that there is a strong linkage between national accounting and business accounting, especially in France, but also in other systems. And those links are going the two ways. So national accounting reused concepts and data from business accounting. And actually in France, the INSEE is actually gathering the business accounting books, merging them and building the statistics like that, which is not the case in many other countries, because they usually use surveys or statistical methods that do not rely directly on the actual data. And then on the other side, the other way, the state use this information and act on businesses. So it sets rules to build the accounting systems, but it also creates regulations and incentives that are really anchored in the business accounting. So, and that's very important, because that's also one reason why there was such a big standardization in France. It was to improve the state capacity to act and to foster and to influence the corporates. And so and now we have a very strong link between accounting and law, which is quite very, very interesting, and a lot of incentives, and for instance taxes that are calculated based on accounting, and so on. But we don't have that for the environment, for instance. And so what we thought is that maybe we could also maybe do the same, replicate this link between the two systems, or maybe create new relationship that would be more specific to the environment. And for instance, distribute ecological budgets of impacts, create new incentives, target public investment, and so on. So and so to elaborate a bit on that, I propose this representation. So you have on the one side the ecological liabilities, and on the other the assets. And now I would like you to imagine how the corporate will react if it really has to calculate, publish, and then repay the ecological debt. And how would the other actors react to this information? So if the company really has to preserve, which is actually the case in some specific situations, like for instance, they have to record decommissioning costs, for instance, for nuclear plants, which is very close to what we define as a liability. The environmental impact studies that most of the big infrastructure projects have to make also is very close to what we call a liability. So there are already existing institutions and regulation that are very close. And what we can see and what we can imagine for the future of liabilities is that if they have to preserve, they will be more careful on the impact they make. Because if at some point you have to repay it, to repair, to restore, you will be careful before the project implementation. And if you know that it will be very costly to repair it, maybe you will not impact it at all. And there are studies that shows that, for instance, in Natura 2000 areas, that you have fewer impacts because they know that it will be more costful to repair them. Then the other stakeholders would react also, because when you publish liabilities, the other stakeholders can see that, and they can they can be involved in the negotiation of the target itself. So of course it doesn't only rely on the accounting system itself, but also of the rules of governance, the regulation, and so on. But at least if there is the information and the whole governance and institution, you can imagine that the stakeholders could be involved in the negotiation of the threshold. And again, it's also what's partly happening today around infrastructure projects, or for instance on the water framework directive implementation in France. We also see that the stakeholders are involved in the definition of the targets at the local level. And of course, the state can also use that information, for instance, to create new prudential rules that would be based on solvency ratio for all the companies. However, on the ecological asset is not really linked to law or to external influence, because in accounting, the assets really represent what belongs to the company, and it's and even in financial accounting, it's not related to law or to external views. In contrast with the liabilities that really represents all the relationship between the company itself and the other actors outside of it. So this line was related more to legislation and regulation. Now we are moving to incentives. So these accounting systems could have effect because the company itself would want to reduce the preservation cost, and on the other side increase the value derived if there is a cost at some point. So there is the idea to optimize everything. And but I think it's more useful when you consider a system of actors interacting with the company, because then the company itself can justify on a very strong way how much it needs to repay the liabilities, because accounting is a certified system with high quality information. And today the negotiations are very fuzzy, and people don't know actually how much it would cost for the company. They don't know the actual impacts very well, so it's very difficult for NGOs to really know specifically what's happening on every ecological issue. But if you have this strong system, then you can have really informed negotiation about how much is needed and who can pay or not. So that would really help. And obviously, at the state level, it also gives very robust information. Then on the asset side, it could also help the company itself and stakeholders to optimize things, like investing in nature-based solutions, or maybe creating payment for ecosystem services. So this is a more narrow scope, and especially for the payment for ecosystem services that often do not work very well. But at least if there is this accounting system, it could help those payments and justification of the payments. And then I will turn to more normative, to another area of use of the accounting system we propose. So that relates more to to not to regulation or incentives, but to the certifications and norms that that can be built. Like actually, I'm referring to Halpern and Lescum and Lagallès classification of state action and instruments, and there that's one of the last category. So certifications, norms, and standards, and so on. And so here, if the companies publish new performance related to the environment, it could want to optimize its own performance to be the best in class. And for the others, it can foster stronger certifications and labels, because now you would have a better information that in comparison to what we have, for instance, for forest management or other things. It can help the state to create indicative planning, and you also have a few other things that can be used by investors and shareholders to influence the company or to interact with it. And so so actually you see that it's quite rich, and it can help a lot of different intervention, and it can have a lot of effects. So in the end, I thought it might be actually possible to consider a new kind of state. At least I was asking the question based on that ecological accounting systems at both the national and the local level, because it's not exactly the engineering state, even though there are many things coming from there, like the whole biophysical and system that is very detailed, the idea of distance to target, but also there are some neoliberal state things with the corporate reporting, with the idea of benchmarking and comparison between actors. And also another important thing is that there is these accounting systems gives a lot of liberty to the companies and the corporates on how to act and on where to go, because they don't necessarily have to really stick to the threshold. The idea with accounting is to represent the distance to the threshold, and if some can repay all their debt, well, it's great, but they don't necessarily have to. And then you see the overall performance, the economic and ecological performance, and you can compare the companies, and it already creates some effects. Yeah, and so so it relates a bit of both. So and then I put it tentative ideas that actually relates to a lot of work that have been presented here, and yeah, so that's what it helps too, and I propose a way of thinking the economy. Well, it's a proposal. I'm not very sure of it, and I think it would be refined if I read your book, Cédric. Yeah. And then, well, the big question was how to name that kind of state. So I couldn't resist to bound the two contradicting systems, especially after the discussion of this morning. So I called it a neoliberal planning state, because it uses both kind of inputs. And then my fingers split, because I should have wrote ecological bifurcation and not redirection, of course. But yeah, at least that's a bit of to open the discussion. But I think we can find a better name for that. So yeah, so I leave you with a few takeaways. And I thank you very much for your attention, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.